I can show you what the current thinking is about roadmap items for FAIR and machine actionability for six different stakeholders. The stakeholders are publishers, funders, policymakers, research performing organizations, and what we say is data intensive industry and service providers. And also there's another category added. People thought it was important to have research infrastructures and repositories. It's kind of separating that out, we thought, from publishers. So that's what that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stakeholders. The roadmap that we propose from the Lawrence workshop here will address decadal items, decade-long priorities for those stakeholders. And what you see here is the beginning of a list from our morning breakouts and our afternoon breakouts of what these priorities might begin to look like. So any questions at this point? That makes sense? Okay. So for publishers, I didn't have time to really edit this down, but for publishers, I think what was of interest was, and in fact, there were publishers, right, in this breakout. What was of interest was the formation of a neutral, academically accepted body who might concern themselves with fair digital objects and issues around fair digital objects that would enable, as a high priority, the checking and validation of metadata and content to get around like these research integrity issues. So more and more content is flowing in that is machine generated and is often just spurious content that can lead to increased citation scores and can lead to all kinds of rewards, but it's completely bogus content. It's just created by machines at a huge rate. So I think the academic publishing industry is looking towards some kind of FDO capability to handle many things, but in particular, this growing problem on research integrity. It might mean agreements or conventions on the extension of machine actionable metadata. So there's a talk about like PROV plus some other things for publishers. So an industry agreement on that. There's also a movement over the next 10 years, perhaps, to let go of XML and to begin to embrace more semantically enriched markup standards like JSON-LD or other things, with kind of a, there's knowledge graph formats. So with the target of being more knowledge graph-like, being able to make knowledge graphs out of data and metadata and information. And also roadmap items that might focus on sustainability models. So who pays for these things over the long term? Are there business models behind it? Are there other ways of supporting these kind of common neutral infrastructures, even in a competitive industry setting? Yeah. So that's machine actionability for publishers. What does machine actionability mean for funders, and what would be roadmap items? So machine actionability, this group had like 3 levels of like maybe the introduction or progressive introduction of machine actionability for funders. One is just to administer their own grants. This would mean a lot to funders in just that they waste a lot of time internally administering grants with spreadsheets. And I've heard horror stories about common information, really simple things, but it comes across in multiple spreadsheets. And so, high-level people are cutting and pasting columns just to make a sense of information. So I think there's a growing awareness that machine actionability could help just in kind of bureaucratic administration. But the next level then would be to begin to align administrative and other program initiatives between funders. So having structures that can allow you to coordinate between programs within a funder, but also between funders. An example being cancer research going on at the NIH and cancer research going on at the NSF could follow, in principle, some common minimal standards for that. Or at least there could be common libraries of vocabularies and metadata schema that could be, adopted or endorsed for funders in particular. And then lastly, the funders might actually evolve to a point in the next 10 years of being able to have and mandate machine actionable research questions, research data. And so actually doing science with FAIR, not only kind of the funding of research. And then there was this acknowledgement that in order to get level 1, level 2, level 3 going, there will need to be a reexamination of budget and in budget allocations to cover these things. So right now, a lot of funders would like to move in these directions, but their mandate, their legal bounds are, to fund research, not infrastructure. So funders would love to find a way to change those rules to allow them to fund data stewardship activities in a better way and research infrastructure. So those are nice roadmap items. Any questions there? Okay. Next up would be the policymaker stakeholder community. And this was the idea that, their focus as a policymaker, for at least for the groups that we're talking about, their goal is effective science. That's our high level objectives. So framing the machine actionability is really in service of that objective. And so there's FAIR for data and machine actionable metadata for data and for FAIR infrastructures. And policymakers are worried about all kinds of obligations, regulatory obligations, international obligations. And so they would like to find machine actionability that would assist them in meeting those obligations. That's what worries a policymaker. So what they want then, the way you can frame roadmap items for policymakers is that they can work towards statements and ultimately funding. So they can have mandates and they can have some way of raising funding to support those mandates. And this would encourage, for among other things, a national persistent identifier strategy, STRAGLY. So it's the idea that somebody has to take authority or responsibility for PIDs, and that could be a national thing, for example. Machine actionability for metadata, machine actionability for rights and usage statements. So really beginning to encode kind of legal documents, machine actionable way. And then also, I thought this was interesting. They didn't comment on it much, but I would like to know more. Machine actionability for error estimation. I guess realizing that data is one thing, but having kind of quality control in the form of error estimations is another thing. And by the way, all these bullet points here are really coming out of a brainstorm breakouts today. They will be refined over the week, and there will be a document right at the end that will be shared. Next was the research performing organizations. So universities or even private research organizations. And the idea here was it was recognized that a good long-term 10-year goal is really to change the research culture from what it has grown up to be to what it needs to be in the future. They think that having lots of statements and very clear stories about successes of FAIR, but also the risks of FAIR, kind of, where things have gone horribly wrong because there was no machine actionable information available. It was, the information was either lost or just not processable because of no one had bothered to do that. So they thought these were important elements to get that culture change. It could be a part of toolkits that would explain the whys and the hows for this sort of thing. So there could be for universities, for national, for universities in a certain national context, there could be toolkits available with these components. And then there was also this idea that funders and publishers can do the difficult thing, and that is to impose regulations and requirements. So you don't get funding unless you've reached a certain level of fairness or machine actionability. Or by law, you have to reach some level of machine actionability. So there's a recognition that the stick versus the carrot has a role to play here. It was also recognized that funders and publishers happen to be other stakeholders that we're talking to here. So then there was this idea that maybe the roadmap should also contain a plan about how these different stakeholders might actually synergize their efforts, and if that might even lead to kind of exponential leverage here to help move things quicker. There were two more stakeholder communities: the data-intensive industry and service providers, and the research infrastructures and repositories. I will leave it to you as homework to go back to the common notes and see what they produced, because they're actually reporting out right now in the other room, and I'm not there to hear it. So that's where we are at the end of day 2. We will try to shift this daily video call. We're going to try and shift it by a half hour or maybe an hour for tomorrow. So stay tuned. I see who's on the line now. We'll send out emails or some kind of an alert that this Zoom will shift probably by an hour so that we can have more time to consolidate the notes. And tomorrow we should see very similar format. Then I'll give you some bullet points for roadmap items for these stakeholders regarding equitability and data equitability tomorrow.
A practical question, Eric.
Yeah.
Because tomorrow, for all the participants in the room, there will be the dinner, and the bus will leave at 5 for that dinner.
Yeah. And I'm scheduled to be on that boat.
Yes. You all are.
I am.
Just take that into account.
Yeah. So we could, maybe for simplicity then, a good point, Jacinta, maybe we should keep the reporting the same time as today for tomorrow. And we'll just do our best again. On the other hand, so let's say this. We've recorded part of this session here. We wanted this recording to play tomorrow morning for our colleagues in our Eastern time zones. I'm going to record this anyways. I think re-record this, so it's a better presentation for tomorrow morning. So why don't we just do this, Jacinta? Let's keep the reporting out at 16:10, like we did today. So everyone, we'll meet again the same time tomorrow on this channel, and I'll report out. But there may be a more complete reporting loaded onto the YouTube video the next day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we got to do it that way. So any other questions or comments?
Well, thank you, Eric, and taking the effort to do this as well. And I will see you tomorrow again.
Okay, yeah, nice to have you back then, Christina.
Thanks for the summary.
Thank you, Eric.
Okay, Chris. Yeah, and we'll talk to you guys tomorrow.
Bye.
If you have any comments, put them in the notes, like in the Google Docs. Ciao, everyone.